You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a happy Friday. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and you are watching the Greeks Gridiron. It's Friday, which means, of course, we've got predictions to make for every single game that we will watch here in week number 7 of the NFL on Sunday. Monday's game predictions will come out, of course, Sunday early in the day prior to that early window, somewhere around during like that London time frame, give or take, before maybe in the middle of the game, maybe right as it's ending, somewhere in there. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. And as always, we're here for a good time. We're just making predictions for fun. None of this is meant to be that serious. So dive in. Let me hear from you. I want to hear your thoughts on this week's matchups, who you like, who you dislike, who's coming away with a win and why. And we will start off, as we always do, when there's a game overseas, bright and early. The Rams taking on the Jaguars and in what is essentially a home game for the, at this point, London Jaguars when it feels like they're overseas. It's always a tough game to figure out because you never really know what you're going to get from these teams. And I feel like this past season so far, what we've seen from all these games overseas very much echoes that. You have some higher scoring affairs, but for the most part, a lot of them tend to be a little bit on the lower scoring side. The jet lag and just being overseas and all of that seems to throw a lot of teams off. And I kind of feel like the way these two teams are set up right now, we might see more of the same for that in this one here. The Rams are coming off of an uncomfortably tight win, I would say, over a Ravens team that has fallen completely apart to this point in the year. And I would have expected a little bit more of a dominating performance, but only a 17-3 win in that matchup. And coming into this now, Puka Nacua is down, and it seems like he's going to miss at least a few weeks of action with that injury that he's dealing with. I believe it was an ankle injury, if I'm remembering correctly. That being said, what does this offense look like minus a Puka Nacua then? Because you're going up against a Jaguars defense that still has some struggles against the pass, and it seems like the way that they have built this Rams offense, it goes through Matthew Stafford's arm, starts and stops there. So yes, you're minus Puka Nacua, who for the team at this point has well over 50 catches. He's north of 600 yards. He's a big part of what they do, but they do still have some competent pass catchers to work with. This is exactly why you go out and get a guy like a Devontae Adams, because obviously you want him to complement Puka, but if he does go down, you still have a guy who you could rely on as like a de facto number one in the interim until Puka makes his eventual return. You're going to have to look at guys, though, like Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell, and even running back Kyron Williams to really step up in the passing game overall. But like I said, Jacksonville's defense against the pass, averaging about 256 yards per game right now, which is fourth most, in the NFL. They recently tried to do a bit of a corner swap with the trade of Tyson Campbell, bringing in Greg Newsome. Obviously, you have a rookie in Travis Hunter in that secondary, still trying to figure out what his role is in that defense as well. So there's a lot to kind of look at as far as what this passing attack could look like. And then on the flip side, I look at Jacksonville, and for what it's worth, I mean, the Rams defense, especially up front, their pass rush is a pretty aggressive unit, and they're a tough team to deal with, and they can get a little bit overwhelming with a bunch of young and feisty guys that are working over there. So when you look at how Jacksonville may want to attack this defense, I think I'm going to look to what they're going to do on the ground here. The Rams run defense right now, it's a pretty good unit. They rank, they're actually tied for 6th, in terms of yards per attempt allowed this season at only 3.8 yards per attempt. So teams aren't necessarily running the ball at a super effective clip against them. They only have 2 rushing touchdowns allowed as well. And this is all while despite facing the 10th most rushing attempts this season. But the Jaguars have found success running the ball, and it's going to be a tough task, but Travis Etienne has reemerged and looks like that guy that I think the Jacksonville Jaguars initially thought he was going to be coming out of college alongside Trevor Lawrence. 470 yards rushing so far this season. He's averaging a whopping 5.3 yards per attempt. He's breaking big runs left and right. And then on top of that, Jacksonville currently ranks 3rd best in terms of offensive runs, stuffed. So they are not having anyone really hold them at all so far this season when it comes to running the football. And then, like I said, with the pass rush the way it looks in LA, it's one of those units that you don't necessarily want to go to battle with. They're a tough unit to deal with. They're a tough unit to defend. And the way it stands right now, top 5 in a handful of categories. And if they're not top 5, they're somewhere along the lines of like top 6, 7, 8. I think running the ball might do the Jaguars a lot of good in this game here. So I think that's the way they go for the attack. As for who I think is going to win, this is a bit of a toss-up, but ultimately I do think I'm going to take the Rams in this first game. I have them winning something along the lines of like a 21-14 contest, but it's one of those lower scoring, kind of hard to decipher kind of games. Just it's always like that overseas. And with injuries that you're looking at, like with Puka Nacua and the uncertainty surrounding some of the offensive production we've seen from this Jaguars team to this point, I feel like erring on the side of Rams is probably my best bet here. So give me LA. Again, 21-14, probably a little bit on the lower scoring side as both offenses work through that jet lag that is ultimately inevitable with these overseas games in London. Looking at the next game, we have ourselves Saints going in to take on the Bears in Chicago here. Chicago looking to make it 4 straight wins in this one. I think for New Orleans, if you're looking at this game, it's simply put coming down to ball protection. And the reason I say that is because Chicago's defense now is literally ripping wins away from teams courtesy of their defense. If you look at their last 3 games, they're currently sitting on 11 total takeaways just in these last 3 games alone. They literally won last week in part because the defense was able to make such a massive play, get the ball away from Jaden Daniels, and put the offense in a position for that game-winning field goal. New Orleans offense, the way it's stood so far this year, pretty good at protecting the football. Spencer Rattler's actually done an excellent job. He's not throwing interceptions. He only has 1 on the season so far. But when you look at the 4 of their last 5 games, they've been good for about a turnover a game right now. And that's one of those things where it just feels like it's a unlucky or a bad mistake that happens at least once a game for New Orleans, which could get amplified going up against a team like a Chicago Bears that is at this point good for like at least 2 a game in almost the last month of play. So ball protection is everything for the Saints if they want to hang around in this game here. On the flip side, I look at Chicago's offense and just the way that we've seen Caleb Williams start to evolve in year 2 inside of Ben Johnson's offense. And I think one thing we cannot ignore is this emergence now of DeAndre Swift, who's not only doing it out of the backfield, but he's starting to find some more looks in the passing game as well. And I think that suits him perfectly. And it also suits this offense perfectly because DeAndre Swift is a guy who can catch, who can run, and if you can get him catching balls out of the backfield and on top of that, being able to run out of the backfield as well, we're talking dual threat ability, and we're talking somebody who could open up the offense for Caleb Williams. And I'm sorry, my cat here is trying to invade this conversation here. Once again, well, this is the second time we've seen Feta. This is Feta, everyone. Say hello. He's very cute, but he's a troublesome guy. That being said, as I was saying about DeAndre Swift, you look at what he does, his ability to catch out of the backfield and run on the ground. It feels like the past few weeks he's really starting to carve out a nice role within this offense, and it's going to open things up in the passing game for Caleb Williams. I feel like the Bears offense, the way it's worked so far this season, they feel like they come out getting shot out of a cannon. Things kind of slow down in like the second and third-ish quarter, and then they pick back up in the fourth. I feel like having a more consistent guy out of the backfield in a DeAndre Swift might help even that out and not put you in a position where your defense needs to force a fumble or come away with an interception to ultimately win a football game. Or maybe you have to end up blocking a field goal to win, a la against the Raiders a few weeks ago. I really like the direction this offense is heading, and I think we finally seeing with that 175-yard performance from Swift last week have maybe seen the running back and just the ground game overall start to emerge a little bit more with this offense. That being said, I am one of those people that has the New Orleans Saints pegged as one of the worst teams in the NFL, and I have them somewhere within that top 5 as far as picking at the top of the draft of next season goes. I'm not putting a ton of stock in them being able to come away with this game. The Saints are a tough out, don't get me wrong, and I do have a feeling that they do give the Bears a hell of a game before ultimately folding in the end and losing. So I have the Bears winning. But by no means is this some sort of runaway by Chicago. I think it's one of those, like, they hang around, they make Chicago uncomfortable, but Chicago's been winning those games that they used to lose in that situation. So I do still think they get the job done here, but it's one of those, like, Chicago Bear gritty wins, like 23-17. New Orleans just won't go away, but ultimately they get the job done late. Looking at our third contest, we have ourselves the Dolphins and Browns, and my goodness, it's the yuck game of the week. Both teams coming in 1-5, complete opposite problems. The Saints, Miami's offense, serviceable, but the defense, not great. You look at Cleveland, their offense, not great. The defense, really good unit. Pretty unfortunate that it's getting wasted by the offense on the other side of the football. I think when you look at this matchup for Miami, if they want to come out victorious, especially with just kind of the drama surrounding this team right now, it's got to be through Devon Achane. The last 3 games of the season have been pretty good for him. 99 yards and a touchdown against the Jets. He did have a tough one against Carolina, admittedly, but then followed it up with a really strong performance against LA with 128 yards and a couple of scores. If you can lean on him and find some success against this Cleveland Browns defense that has not been exactly the easiest to run against. They've only allowed 100 yards twice this season, 100 against Pittsburgh last week, and then 109 against Detroit. And that 109 against Detroit, in my opinion, holds a lot of weight because that is a run-heavy offense that will pound you into submission if you get the opportunity to. If they can find even just like a solid game from him and get especially like a guy like a Myles Garrett to have to even hesitate for a slight second in trying to decide whether this play action is going to be a run or a pass, Miami could put themselves in a position to win this football game. On the flip side, though, you look at the offense of the Browns, and it's not been bad. It's not been good. It's been a little bit up and down for Dillon Gabriel to this point. You look at how things looked as far as the game in Minnesota against Minnesota overseas was fine, and then last week, not a great showing. 52 passes attempted in that one, and just not something you want to be putting your rookie quarterback into, especially somebody who is as late of a pick as a Dillon Gabriel is concerned. However, Miami's pass defense is not necessarily the most stout in the world. 221 yards per game allowed. They're allowing about 7.1 yards per passing play, 11 passing touchdowns allowed on top of that. And their secondary's been banged up. However, they've been getting healthy over the last few weeks. So that could be a unit that's revitalized going into this one and ultimately may err on Miami's favor ultimately, just because I don't really know what to make of Dillon Gabriel to this point. It's too early to tell, and the early signs are not super promising. They're not like, oh my God, this is not going to work, but it's just one of those things that doesn't have me, ready to lock in and be like, yeah, Dillon Gabriel for the Browns kind of deal. I would love to see Cleveland lean into Quinshon Judkins in this game, though. I think this is the win condition for Cleveland. Hand the ball off to Quinshon Judkins, maybe get Sample involved in the running game as well. And if you end up running the ball 35 times, so be it. Lean on your defense, control the game, limit the opportunities that even minus a Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins offense can still be fairly potent in, especially in the passing game. You're looking at a Miami run defense that's given up about 169 yards per game right now. They are the league worst, and they're allowing 5.6 yards per attempt on top of that, which is top 3 as well. And they've allowed 32 runs over 10 yards this season, which is the most in the NFL. Run the ball, lean on your defense, and I think the Browns get the job done on this one, 20-10, lower scoring affair. A lot of ball control coming from both sides because, again, I think Miami needs to find some sort of passing attack to get going here, because if Myles Garrett gets going and that pass rush disrupts the rhythm for Miami, you're looking at a literal nightmare performance for the Dolphins, and you don't want that. So I think a lower scoring affair is in store for us, but I do like the Browns 20-10. This next one's Raiders and Chiefs, and again, we don't do betting here, but I do like to check out the spread for all the games just because I'm curious, and to see a minus 11.5 favor for the Chiefs is crazy here. Rashee Rice coming back is going to be huge for the Chiefs offense, in my opinion. He's going to help take this offense to the level that it was anticipated of being this season, and honestly, maybe even somewhere around where it should have been last year before he ultimately went down, getting injured running into Patrick Mahomes. You look at the way Mahomes has played over the last 3 weeks, the passing attack's been pretty solid. 282 yards per game, 8 touchdowns, an interception, completing 70% of his passes. And Rashee Rice, if you go back to that 2023 season, was good that rookie year. Almost 80 catches, a little bit over 900 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. You have him come in. He can now take some of the attention away from Xavier Worthy. He can open up some of the passing lanes over the middle for a guy like Travis Kelce, who has been taking on way too much responsibility. At this point, Kelce's supposed to be a complement to a Rashee Rice, to an Xavier Worthy. That early stretch where Xavier Worthy went down and you were still waiting for Rashee Rice to come back from suspension ultimately exposed this offense for not what it was, but just it was in a bad situation, and you got what you got. Now that Xavier Worthy's been back in the fold the last few weeks and you have Rashee Rice coming into play now, I think we're going to get the true look of this offense. And Patrick Mahomes has already been kind of catching fire, and I think things start to open up some more. With Las Vegas's pass defense not necessarily being the most stout in the world, they haven't allowed more than 221 net passing yards in the last 4 games, though. They've been pretty solid. It'll be an interesting matchup nonetheless. For the Raiders side, It's got to be Ashton Genty for me. This is one of those things where when you look at KC, they've allowed over 120 yards rushing 3 different times this season. They held Detroit to just 98 yards last week, but they have had moments and games this season where you can break a big run on them. Ashton Genty found a little bit of success last week, and it has been a wildly, a literal definition roller coaster ride watching Geno Smith play quarterback for the Raiders this season, whether it's multiple interception games, and he's got 3 of them. It's one of those things where you got to take some of the pressure off him. Brock Bowers' status is up in the air. Jacoby Myers' status is up in the air. You want to open things up for a guy like Trey Tucker, who has emerged this season as like the number 1 option, almost out of necessity because of how many injuries surround him in the passing game. You've got to run the football and lean on Ashton Genty. He found some success last week against Tennessee, 75 yards and a score. His previous 2 games, again, not necessarily the most exciting in the world. He had 67 yards and 4.8 yards per attempt versus Indianapolis, but the week prior to that, 138 yards, 6.6 yards per attempt, and a touchdown against Chicago. He's finding that rhythm. He's finding some of that explosiveness that he showcased in college and ultimately made him the reason he was drafted so high. I think if they lean on the ground game, they can keep this game close. But I do have my reservations about that defense being able to hold up against what is now going to be a fully fledged Chiefs offense. They might not reach like the full potential level immediately. Like I don't think Rashee Rice is going to step back into things and just have no rust. It's going to take him a little bit to get really into the thick of things. But something tells me that the Chiefs do find some success here. I like them winning. 11.5 points is absolutely absurd. I don't like that's just a hard thing to predict. And I don't know if the Raiders are that bad, but I do like the Chiefs winning, and I have them winning 28-19. So a comfortable win, but I do think the Raiders have a chance to hang around a little bit. They bring the fight to Kansas City, and that's one of those things I respect about Las Vegas, no matter the situation of both of these teams every single year. So I do think they hang around, but this game does feel a little bit lopsided to KC, hence 28-19. Pretty solid advantage for the Chiefs in this one, in my opinion. Now we'll look at the Eagles and Vikings. Now, the Eagles are in a spot, man, because 2 straight losses, and the noise is getting loud regarding this offense and just the inefficiency of it, A.J. Brown not being happy, and just the current state of it overall. On the flip side of things, as it currently stands of when I'm recording this, there's no answer to whether J.J. McCarthy is playing or not. I am kind of erring on the side of maybe one more week before we see McCarthy. I could be wrong. It's just kind of what I'm reading and what I'm kind of anticipating, but there's no definitive answer as of me recording this. I don't know how much that affects this game, but I almost feel like if McCarthy's starting, it affects Minnesota negatively just because of the limited sample size we got from J.J. McCarthy so far this year. And I'm scared to see him come back against the Philadelphia Eagles for his sake. So I do kind of err on the side of maybe we get one more game of Carson Wentz looking at this. So that's kind of where my mindset is as I look at it. Despite that, though, you look at what this Philadelphia Eagles offense has looked like so far this season, and the identity of it does appear to be missing. A lot of people are saying that the offense has become way too predictable, and they're not good enough to be that predictable right now. Like the offensive line is just not nearly as dominant as it was last season for the offense to be so predictable. If that's truly the case or not, I don't have the answer to. I do think there is some fairness in that criticism. Philadelphia has not run for over 100 yards on the ground since week 2 of this season, so there definitely is some truth to that, in my opinion, and just the lack of push that line's getting up front. And they've been relying heavily on the passing game, especially the last couple of weeks. You're looking at an average about 262 yards per game net passing for the Eagles the last couple of weeks, and I'll be curious to see if maybe that adjusts this week. The reason for that being Minnesota been a very good passing defense this season, which is kind of flipped from where they were last year. Last season, they let up a ton of yards through the air, but nobody could run on them. This season, no yards being allowed through the air. They're actually second best in the NFL, allowing about 157, 10th best pressure rate in the NFL, 6th best sack rate. They get after the quarterback, but they can't stop the run at all. They're allowing 132 yards per game right now, which is 9th most in the NFL. They're tied for 9th in runs over 10 yards allowed. They're allowing 4.5 yards per attempt on the ground. Teams have been able to find some success running the football, so I feel like maybe we see Saquon Barkley and that offensive line take this Vikings defensive front to task this week and really challenge it and see if they can get back to their run-heavy ways. On the opposite side, regardless of who the quarterback is for Minnesota, You've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Jordan Addison, and I think you just have to kind of lean on that and hope for the best, regardless of who the quarterback is. Running the ball against the Eagles is certainly an option. They have struggled this year, allowing 134 yards per game, 4.7 yards per attempt. Teams are definitely moving on the ground. That being said, though, you cannot deny what Jordan Addison has already added in just a couple of games that he's had so far since coming off of his suspension. 9 catches, 155 yards and a touchdown, and averaging 7.2 yards per reception. It's opening things up for Justin Jefferson, who already has nearly 30 catches and 450 yards himself this season, and I'm assuming those numbers will start to rise even faster now that Jordan Addison's taking attention away from him. And with the running back situation right now, you have Jordan Mason. He's looked really good. I want to see Minnesota find success, not only attacking the ground, but I want to see them utilize these top-end wide receivers that they have. You have this dynamic duo. You're challenging a secondary that has not been perfect this season, definitely not where they were to the level of at the end of last season or for a stretch run of last season in Philadelphia. So I'm very curious to see how they play that out, but you have to, guys, lean on them, attack with those wide receivers, and make that defense prove itself against you. The pass rush in Philadelphia has not been very threatening this season. I'm assuming whoever that quarterback is going to have more time than maybe typical, and that is something that they need to try and take advantage of. As for who I think is going to win, this one's tough because it's in Minnesota. If it was in Philadelphia, I'd feel pretty confident about the Eagles, but I have such a hard time taking Minnesota with me not currently knowing who the quarterback is. And unfortunately, this is the time that I have for when I can do this. I can't wait to do this later. So I'm going with the information I have. I feel even worse about Minnesota if it's JJ McCarthy. I feel better about them if it's Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz is certainly not perfect either. I'm going to take the Eagles just because I'll trust quarterback matchup overall makes me feel good. Kevin O'Connell is going to take Nick Sirianni to task. I'll give coaching to Kevin O'Connell every single day of the week when it comes to these two teams. And I do think Minnesota's defense could pose a problem for Philadelphia, especially with the troubles they have. And if Philadelphia loses this game, they're kind of in a must-win situation here to keep their season from derailing. It feels like more is on the line for Philly. That might give them an extra edge in this one. So I'm going to take the Eagles, but it's give me Eagles 24-21. They're not running away with this game. The defense isn't great enough right now to hold Minnesota down by any means. It's probably going to be tighter. So I'll take Philadelphia. Not one of my most confident picks, though. Next one we're looking at is the Panthers and Jets. Jets obviously trying to get their first win of the season as the lone winless team in the NFL. Jets going to Jets. And then you have the Panthers, who Rico Dowdle is just, at this rate, has a case to be running back one in Carolina after the last 2 games he's played. But it sounds like Chuba Hubbard could be returning as well. And if that's the case, I have a good feeling that this Panthers team might just deploy a 2-back setup a la D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart from back in the day, and they just kind of run that back. The way that Rico Dowdle has played these last 2 starts, 473 total yards, couple of touchdowns to go along with it. And prior to that, Chuba Hubbard, before he went down, 311 total yards. He had a couple of touchdowns himself. You are setting yourself up to be able to absolutely decimate teams on the ground as your passing game continues to evolve with a lot of youth and a lot of young talent trying to figure themselves out there. The New York Jets defense has been far from perfect. They're currently 10th in rushing yards per game allowed, allowing about 4.3 yards per attempt. But Carolina's offense on the ground has been phenomenal. 5 yards per attempt, 142 yards per game. I want to see Carolina take that strength and put that Jets defense to task, because I do think some of those numbers for the Jets are a little bit skewed because they had an overseas game last week and they made Denver's offense look a little bit weaker per se, but that was kind of an overseas type of thing. I'm very, very unsure of what this Jets team actually is and what that Jets defense actually is, and I think Carolina might be able to take them to task here, especially if they try to run the football. On the flip side, looking at the Jets, the big thing we got to get on here is going to be the availability of Garrett Wilson. He's missing practice. He might not be available. That is definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Again, as of me recording this, I don't have full information on if he's playing or not, but him missing a couple of days of practice alone is worrisome with that knee issue. No other wide receiver on the Jets roster right now has more than 100 yards receiving. You've got Mason Taylor, your tight end, and Breece Hall, your running back, who both have over 100 yards receiving. But Garrett Wilson's the only wide receiver north of 100 yards receiving so far. And we are currently going into week 7 of the NFL. That is not a good state of circumstance for the passing game. Jets, they've been able to run fairly consistently. They can lean on Breece Hall, 410 yards on the ground, 4.7 yards per attempt so far this season. But Carolina's run defense the last 3 weeks has turned into a bit of a monster. From the literal worst run defense I have personally witnessed last season to the first 2 or 3 weeks, things were still kind of scary. These last 3, they've shut it down. They're allowing 45 yards per game on the ground. They have gotten tough up front, and they are not letting running backs break anything off right now. Breece Hall's name keeps getting thrown around in trade conversation as well. I'll be very curious to see what the Jets' kind of point of attack is for this game here, because I don't really know what it is. They can't throw the football. You might potentially be shopping your running back, so how much usage do you want him to actually have at this point? Your season's already over with at 0-6. You're not making the playoffs. It would take a miraculous turnaround of 11 straight wins and hoping that the rest of your division falls off a freaking cliff. So I don't really know what the Jets' plan is offensively. I like the Panthers in this one. I can't, at this point, I cannot confidently take the Jets in any game this season until I am proven otherwise that they can win a football game. So I'll take the Panthers. Maybe the Jets make it a little bit interesting, but I like Carolina 24-16. Another tough game for the Jets, 0-7. More Jets mistakes, just like mistakes, whatever you want to call them. But I do think the Panthers get the job done here. Now we got Patriots and Titans, and I'll be honest with you all, I have stuff to break this game down. This is the Mike Vrabel revenge game. There is so much animosity between Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans and what happened with their eventual split that went down a couple of seasons ago. The fact that you have a team who is now working with an interim head coach and Mike McCoy, who hasn't been a head coach, I believe, in a decade, roughly, give or take. He's now leading the way for Tennessee because Brian Callahan's been fired. And the conversation of the firing seemed to be, amongst a lot of pundits, that you basically fired Brian Callahan because you did not want Mike Vrabel, the guy you fired, to embarrass you as you're being coached by the guy you hired to replace him. I get that. That is a crazy thought process if that's really the case. I also am Brian Callahan was not doing a great job. So I completely understand where Tennessee kind of came from. It sucks for Cam Ward. I feel for him. But I have no idea how Tennessee wins this football game. The O-line is an absolute nightmare. They are tied for first in sacks allowed at 25. They're not getting pushed in the run game. 31st in rushing yards they're sitting at about 82 yards per game. New England's pass rush been pretty good. Not the best, not the worst. They've been about average to slightly above. Against the run, they're 4th in rushing yards per game allowed. There's nothing in the trenches that leans even slightly to Tennessee's way. And on top of that, Drake May is just having this otherworldly second season right now where he is just on an absolute tear. 6th in passing yards per game. He's got 10 touchdowns, only a couple of picks. He's 2nd in completion rate right now. He's playing unbelievable football. There is nothing that makes me feel comfortable about taking Tennessee in this game. Even if the game's in Tennessee, and a lot of people go, interim head coach bump, new head coach bump, blah, 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 whenever that happens midseason. I don't think so about this game. This Patriots team and their players love Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel wants to win this football game. His players will do what they need to do for him to win this football game. If it's not Patriots by a million, I'm surprised. I'll take New England on this one. 30-10, dominant victory. Mike Vrabel walks away laughing, dusting off his hands with a job well done. Giants and Broncos are the next one up on the docket here. This one's an interesting one because you have the Giants, for whatever reason, are now, they're 2-4. Their only 2 wins are 2 of the most improbable upset wins of the season so far, which is insane that that's the current state that the Giants are in right now. The way you look at this football game, Denver's coming in. They have by far the best pass rush in the NFL. It's not even a conversation with how they currently stand. 30 sacks through 6 games. They're currently on pace for 85 through a 17-game season right now. They're averaging 5 per game. The Giants' offensive line 16 sacks allowed, 86 pressures allowed, tied for 8th most in the NFL. Jackson Dart, when he's not under pressure, cool as a cucumber. 73% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, no picks, no problem. Dude's got all the swagger in the world. Absolutely. Jackson Dart versus pressure, though, 1 touchdown, pair of interceptions, 48% completion rate. Those numbers tank near 25% on that completion percentage there. Nick Bonito's leading the way for this Denver Broncos pass rush with 8 sacks. He's actually leading the NFL right now as it currently stands. A literal household name at this point. I'm glad he is finally being talked about as that guy because he is unbelievable with what he does coming off the edge. I do not know if this Giants O-line is going to be able to hold up against this group. The Denver Broncos defensive front is the best in football, in my opinion. There's maybe a few other teams that want to have that conversation. I don't know if it's a conversation. I really like what Denver's doing up front, and it's hard to argue with the numbers on top of that. If the Giants want to get the W in this game, you're going to have to try to build off of what Cam Scatterbo did last week with the 98 yards, the 3 touchdowns, the 5 yards per attempt and all. Denver's run defense, though, is not easy. 6th best in the NFL in terms of yards per game allowed. They've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns all season, which is tied for the lowest in the NFL. And they haven't allowed over 100 yards rushing since week 3. They allowed close to it, 92 last week, but no more than 100 yards since week number 3. If Denver can just run the football effectively, get the play action going, Bo Nix doesn't make mistakes, the Denver Broncos defense will be the deciding factor in this game. And I would have to imagine that this defense, out of any defense in the NFL, is probably going to give Jackson Dart a hell of a time dropping back to throw the football. They lean on, again, that pass rush. They lean on the emerging run game over there in Denver. They should get the job done. I like the Broncos winning this football game. I do like the Giants, though, to maybe keep it a little bit closer. I like Denver 23-13. Not a super dominating performance because the Broncos offense has been a little bit imperfect week to week, depending on what week you're looking at here. I think something along the lines of 23 points. I could see maybe the pass rush of New York giving the Broncos maybe a little bit of a problem here or there on a drive or two. But I do think the Broncos get the job done here, 23-13. But the Giants maybe keep it a little bit closer. This is like 23-13. Denver puts it away in the 4th quarter, so it was tight, and the score makes it look wider than you'd actually expect the game to have been. Now we have the Colts and Chargers. Big news, as it sounds like Joe Alt is working back into practice, and he's limited as it currently stands. I don't know if he's going to be available for this game. I feel like maybe one more week, but again, we'll see. As of me recording, don't know the answer to it, but good news on that front for the Chargers. Meanwhile, you got the Colts, Indiana Jones leading the way, the most improbable team of the 2025 season, in my opinion. Indianapolis's offense is putting up numbers, and it's incredible numbers. 32 points per game right now, first in the NFL. They're scoring on 61.1% of drives, first in the NFL by nearly 10% of drives. That's craziness. 47% third down conversion rate, good for second best in the NFL. They only got 4 offensive turnovers. Los Angeles' defense has been pretty good. They're allowing about 21 points per game, about 5.2 yards per play when you combine both passing and run plays together here. They've been a pretty good defense for the most part. If they want to keep pace with this Colts team, it's going to come down to that pass protection, but also, is Quentin Johnson going to play? He's been limited in practice. It sounds like he could potentially be in the fold and in the thick of things. If he's there, and you see the way Ladd McConkey went off last week, it looks like maybe he got his feet back underneath him. 7 receptions, 100 yards and a score. If you can lean on those two guys, it'll open things up for Keenan Allen over the middle. I do think that the Chargers' passing attack can absolutely go shot for shot with this Colts offense. I trust in Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is definitely one of those upper echelon quarterbacks in the NFL. Using his arm, you should be able to hang around with him. On the flip side, though, Indianapolis, that offense, between what they can do through the air and what they can do on the ground, it's a lot to put up with. And this is where I'm not so sure about maybe LA being able to keep up, because you have Kamani Vidal come in last week. Unbelievable performance. 124 yards, 6.9 yards per attempt. Looked really good, but he is literally a practice squad running back you had to elevate. So now you have him trying to balance out your offense, where the opposing offense has this Daniel Jones-led attack that's been extremely efficient through the air, and Jonathan Taylor, who leads the league in rushing and rushing touchdowns. It's one of those things where defense at some point will come into play here. I will say this. Watching Jacoby Brissett absolutely torch the Colts last week through the air for 320 yards and a couple of touchdowns definitely scared me a bit. It showed that there are still some cracks and flaws within this Lou Anarumo-led defense in Indianapolis, and they're definitely not perfect, but they can get the job done when they need to, and we saw that at the end of that game against Arizona ultimately. This is a tight one and a tough one to go by. The fact that it's in LA makes me actually feel a lot better about the Chargers. I know that, LA is not necessarily home field advantage for the Chargers in the sake of fan experience, but they don't have to do the traveling. Indianapolis does. That alone is a home field advantage, minus anything to have to do with the crowd. That being said, though, I think I like Indy in this one. Gut feelings telling me Colts. If Joe Alt was 100% playing in this game and he was 100% ready to go, like if he plays this week and he's been limited in practice all week, he's not 100%. He's coming back out of necessity more than anything else. If he was full participant, ready to go, he's healthy, I would feel even better about LA, and maybe I'll take the Chargers on this one. But gut feelings telling me Colts. I like them 26-24. I think we get some fireworks. We get some points. But I do think each defense should be able to win out on a drive or two to prevent this game from going into the 30s. But if it does end up in the 30s because both offenses are pretty strong units, that also wouldn't surprise me. But I do think mid-20s, Colts 26-24, maybe a big interception here or there to ultimately seal the game, something along those lines. But give me Indianapolis. Packers and Cardinals are the next one we have to look at, and it sounds like Jacoby Brissett's going to be the QB for Arizona once again, which, interestingly enough, Jacoby Brissett put up the best performance by a quarterback this season so far for the Arizona Cardinals, and that is a problem because Kyler Murray is supposed to be your starter. 320 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, like I just kind of previously mentioned in that last matchup there, and that was while being pressured 23 times, nearly 50% of his dropbacks, and he was sacked twice. He still looked that good. Ultimately cracked when it mattered most, but he looked good for a vast majority of that game. Packers' pass defense has been pretty good. They're about a slightly above average unit. They're only allowing 4.8 yards per passing play, but they've also only allowed 207 yards per game, which puts them just outside the top 10. The pass rush is where I think this will come into play here because Jacoby Brissett under pressure can get a little bit scary, especially with the amount of time I've gotten to watch him playing in New England. He can be a little bit scary when it comes to throwing the football under pressure. Micah Parsons has been a big reason why this pass rush isn't absolutely just awful, and that's pretty surprising, and I think it's pretty damning on what this Packers team could have brought into the season had they not gone out and traded for Micah Parsons. The team as a unit, 12 sacks, 71 pressures, and a 32% pressure rate, which is like roughly league average to slightly below across all those metrics. Micah Parsons alone has 30 pressures and 2.5 sacks. He accounts for nearly half of the team pressures alone. And then those 2.5 sacks, because obviously that guy's facing double teams and sometimes even triple teams left and right, depending on what's going on in the situation. So for Arizona's sake, you probably want to try to throw the football, but if you are, it's got to come out quick. Don't spend too much time. Don't give Jacoby Brissett an extra second or two in the pocket so Micah Parsons can beat his man and ultimately bring you down, get the strip sack and all that. He's the guy that you've got to mitigate. But I would love to say maybe Arizona needs to try to run the football. Green Bay ranks first in the NFL right now in rushing yards per game allowed, and you're currently working on your third string running back, if I'm remembering correctly, in Arizona, because both James Conner and Trey Benson are hurt right now. So you're leaning on Amari DiMercado and company, whoever else is on that roster at this point in the running back room. You're going to have to throw the football. Clearly, if Jacoby Brissett has time and he's comfortable, he can make plays. We saw it last week, and he could challenge this Packers defense. It's just a matter of getting the ball out quickly and doing so. Then you have, of course, Arizona and their ability to disrupt what Jordan Love and this offense has been able to do. It's impressive because obviously you're working with Matthew Golden, who is a rookie right now, and Romeo Doubs. Those are like your two lead two lead wide receivers right now, because obviously Christian Watson working his way back from injury. Jaden Reed, broken collarbone, if I'm remembering correctly, is the injury from like week number 2. So you've been short wide receivers, but Jordan Love's been efficient. 9 touchdowns, 2 picks, 70% completion rate, 1,200 passing yards. He's having a very efficient season taking care of the football, and Matthew Golden's starting to carve out a role. The way you have to stop them, though, is make Jordan Love uncomfortable. When he starts to get under pressure, things get wonky, and the pass rush in Arizona right now, maybe not where you'd want it to be considering how much you invested into that unit during the offseason. You bring in a Josh Sweat, you bring in a Calais Campbell, you're hoping those numbers start to rise. They have 11 sacks on the year, which is not great. Bottom 10 sack rate, bottom 10 pressure rate. Their pass defense has faced the third most passing attempts this season, and it's for good reason. They're allowing a ton of yards per game. They're allowing the sixth most per game at this current moment here. It's one of those things where this feels kind of like a semi-trap game for Green Bay, if more than anything, because you have a backup quarterback in Arizona, but you're going into Arizona against them. And I feel like Green Bay historically has had a little bit of trouble in Arizona from time to time. I like the Packers in this one. And ultimately, I'm trying to find like the route for the Arizona Cardinals to win this game, and I can't really find one. I really can't. So I'm going to take Green Bay. I like them 28-21, something along those lines. I think something should be said about the way Jacoby Brissett played last week and just the lack of pass rush that the Packers have been putting up right now. If Jacoby Brissett has time, I do think they can make it interesting. I just don't know how they're going to run the football, and if this offense gets one-dimensional, I've seen in years past what a one-dimensional offense led by Jacoby Brissett looks like, and it's not pretty. So if they can't run the football and, Jacoby Brissett's even just like mildly uncomfortable in the pocket, I don't put a ton of stock in Arizona this week, unfortunately. So Packers 28-21 with a W. Commanders and Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb told the media, I could have played last week, wanted to make sure I was good to go and 100%. Terry McLaurin sounds like he's going to be out, and now it sounds like Deebo Samuel may be missing time as well. Dak Prescott, without CeeDee Lamb and just working with George Pickens, has been on a tear. And as it currently stands this season, just as a whole, second in passing yards, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, completing about 72% of his passes. And George Pickens has just been phenomenal. 525 yards, 6 touchdowns, which is tied for first in the NFL, averaging 16.4 yards per reception. He has been a number one in the absence of this team's number one. You pair him up with CeeDee Lamb and Dak's dealing the way he's dealing right now, coupled with the fact that Javonte Williams has had a pretty strong season out of the backfield as well, and a career resurgence at this point. If you're without Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is great out of the backfield some games, and then other games it's just not. And I don't know if that's just more indicative of the offensive line maybe struggling in some of their matchups. This game feels like it goes into a shootout. And just based off of who feels like they have more gas in the tank and more firepower to work with, I didn't even mention Jake Ferguson, who is having a career season and is averaging some of the best numbers in terms of receiving for tight ends right now. I think I'm going Cowboys on this one. There is a piece of me that feels like it should be Washington, and I even saw that Washington is favored. And I don't know if that's changed since the last time I looked, because it's been a little bit, but a lot of people seem to like Washington in this game, even on the road in their current situation. And while I get the Packers, I keep saying the Packers because I'm thinking Micah Parsons now. The Cowboys defense, for as bad as it's been, 142 yards per game allowed. They have the third lowest run stuff rate. Like, there's probably a good chance that they can run the football on the ground. But if Dak is just torching that secondary and he's throwing to Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, I mean, you name it, he has it. This is a shootout in the making, in my opinion, and I think Cowboys get it done. I like them 31-27, a lot of points. I think we're going to see some fireworks here. Good NFC East matchup here, especially in Dallas too. Makes me feel even better about the Cowboys getting it done, and I'm worried about the health right now of this Commanders team, and it sucks because you had so much going on surrounding Terry McLaurin leading into the season, and the contract situation ultimately gets hurt like right off the rip, and you haven't had him for a while now, and now even Deebo Samuel's status is up in the air, so we'll see what happens, but I think the Cowboys get it done in a shootout and a lot of points put on the board. And then last but certainly not least, to wrap up the Sunday slate of games, we've got ourselves Falcons and 49ers for Sunday Night Football. George Kittle is back. He's in the fold. He's looking to help reset the tone for this offense. And it sounds like Brock Purdy could potentially make his return as well. That is also up in the air as of me recording this. The big thing I'm looking at is, of course, Atlanta's defense. 139 yards per game allowed right now as far as passing yards are concerned. That is best in the NFL by a bit of a margin. 5th highest pressure rate, 2nd highest sack rate. They might not have the most pressures. They might not have the most sacks. But in terms of a down-by-down basis when they're going up against passing plays, they're getting after the quarterback, they're making them uncomfortable, and they're getting to the quarterback. San Francisco's been throwing the ball a lot, even with the absence of Brock Purdy. Mac Jones has been incredible, 313 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks, but he did come back down to earth last week in that game against Tampa Bay. But they've been putting up 291 yards per game all season long, best in the NFL for San Francisco, which is crazy because everyone thought pound the rock with Christian McCaffrey. Now, Ricky Pearsall's at risk of missing this game. Juwan Jennings has been banged up for weeks, and I don't know if he's going to be ready to go either. You're getting George Kittle back, but the receiving room is now going to be, once again, extremely thin. There is just so much to be said about what this Falcons defense has been doing, and especially with the way that they're generating pressure and how efficient they are with it. Mac Jones, when he gets uncomfortable, is like a completely different quarter. It's crazy. Mac Jones is 2 quarterbacks in one. There's Mac Jones when he's comfortable, and there's Mac Jones when he's not comfortable. Not comfortable Mac Jones, it's a nightmare. It's a literal nightmare. Working in New England sports media, it's a literal nightmare. Got to watch it firsthand for a few years. If they can't keep him comfortable, and your only real receiving option is George Kittle up the middle, or you have Christian McCaffrey lining up and basically playing receiver for you because it feels like you might need him to in this game, that's kind of problematic. Then you have, of course, the injuries that San Francisco continues to deal with every single week as they continue to lose players now that Fred Warner is done for the season. They're roughly like a league average run and pass defense, and you have to go up this week against Bijan Robinson, who at 822 total yards of scrimmage leads the NFL right now. He is literally the heart and soul, I guess is the best way to put it, of this Falcons offense. He is averaging 14.1 yards per reception as a running back, and then 5.8 yards per attempt running the football as a running back. Huge help to Michael Penix, obviously, as he works through his year 2 in this NFL season. And then, of course, he's opening things up for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. This offense is only getting better, it feels, as each week goes by, and Bijan Robinson is a big reason for that. With how banged up San Francisco is and just where they currently stand on both sides of the football, it's easy to look at this and go, San Francisco at home, they've been winning despite all their injuries. They should maybe get the job done. At some point, that luck starts to run out, and it feels like we may have saw it start last week. I will just say that I'm concerned about San Francisco as it stands. This game will dictate how I actually feel about them going forward, and I think the Falcons get the job done. So I'm taking the Falcons on this one, upset victory in San Francisco. I have them winning 24-20. That pass rush is coming to life, and again, 139 yards per game through the air right now. That's not total yardage, that's per game average. I know they've played one game less, it doesn't matter. That's their per game average when they've been on the field. This defense has figured it out, and I'm starting to think they're really legit. They have got some dogs in that secondary, and they have hit on some players over the last couple of seasons for that defense. And if Bijan Robinson continues to take over the way he has, I don't really know who San Francisco has to slow that stuff down. At some point, all of these injuries are going to crack and break this team. Losing Fred Warner last week feels like it might have been that. So we'll see what happens, but I do like Atlanta for the W on this one. Again, 24-20, entertaining contest on Sunday Night Football. Maybe a little bit more entertaining than some people anticipate from this matchup. Those are my predictions, though, going into Sunday for week number 7. As I said earlier, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out. We are, of course, going to discuss and look at the Monday football games on Sunday, so make sure you don't miss out on that. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all on Sunday early to preview Monday Night Football's doubleheader. We got a 7 p.m. and I believe a 10 p.m. game as well. I'll see you then.